This is English shorthand dictation number 270 and the dictation speed is 100 words per minute. Ready? Start. Honorable Chairperson, when I look at this private member's bill saying that this bill is to provide for health as a fundamental right to all citizens, I think that universal health coverage has already been included in Article 21. Therefore, a separate right to health bill makes no sense. Now I come to another structural defect in the bill. Clause 5 of the bill mentions right to food, right to water, right to sanitation, right to therapy, right to health care services, right to road safety, right to occupational safety, protection, etc. Everything is already covered under separate legislations. Bringing in more legislations or more provisions will not really solve the problem. The problem is that health has been an issue in the country since independence, and that is because the resources for generating this kind of health infrastructure have not been available. None can deny the fact that the life expectancy since independence has climbed up from 35 to 75. It has been possible only because every government has created the health infrastructure. But at a time when we are discussing this, India has one doctor for every 1,511 people, whereas WHO recommends one doctor per 1,000 people. So we are way off the mark. And if we talk about specialists, the situation is far worse. If we look at the nurse to population ratio, it is 1 nurse to 670 patients, whereas the WHO norm is 1 nurse to 300 patients. The most important fact is that even today, the out-of-pocket expenses on health for a household in India is about 54%, which is very high. Therefore, there is a need for universal health coverage. Sir, I recently attended a global conference of Parliamentary Union. There, health for all was expressed as the aspiration for every global citizen, not just for Indian citizen. This has been accentuated by the fact that post-pandemic the people have realized that none is safe until everyone is safe. Therefore, when I say that we have to ensure right to health, we have to ensure that this infrastructure, first of all, is available. How can we achieve this? There has been a suggestion in this bill that it will be through a central legislation, whereas health is a state subject. I will not get into the fact whether it can be legislated centrally because it is a state subject. Education is a state subject, but a bill relating to right to education has been passed by the center, enabling the states to make separate rules and spend money. But what is important is that the health expenditure that we do is only 1.5 to 1.7% even after 75 years, whereas the WHO norm is 2.5% of your GDP, and our own national health policy norm is 2.5% of our GDP. I think this is a matter of concern. The real concern is, where will the states get the money from? Where will the state resources come from? But then I must say that despite resource constraints, take the case of Odisha. In Odisha, we are not subscribing to Ayushman Bharat because our scheme ensures health for all in a true sense. Every APL or BPL family member can walk into a government hospital and he will get all kinds of treatment free of cost. If he has to get service from outside the state, there are 200 hospitals which have been empaneled. This is an ideal model, but it requires resources. Not all the states could probably afford it, but this is where the center should move from an insurance model to a rights-based health model where every citizen of India can walk into a hospital and get free medical treatment. Ayushman Bharat is only for indoor healthcare services, not for outdoor services. Sir, I come to a very salient point, and this is relating to the figures of National Family Health Survey. My honorable friend talked about life expectancy. Now I come to the pandemic. If you look at the pandemic, it overwhelmed the health infrastructure of advanced countries too. No country can provide for reserves or a redundant health infrastructure to such an extent that it can meet any pandemic. But what we can do is to be prepared for it. We have to follow the disaster management model that we have already shown. In Odisha, we have done it. The whole world is talking about pandemic preparedness treaty. When we talk about pandemic preparedness, we will naturally be looking into both the human infrastructure as well as the physical infrastructure. Our emphasis in policy has always been on outputs, not on outcomes, and that is the biggest bane. When we are talking about setting up of hospitals, we say that we have set up hospitals without doctors and nurses. That is why it is important to emphasize only on outcomes. Let outcomes be the criteria of all our policies, particularly health and education. Another point which I will talk about is the responsibility or the ownership that the community can take in health related matters. We have seen during the pandemic that the community rose to the occasion to communicate ideas relating to prevention and preparedness of the first wave of the pandemic. Therefore, I harp on a pandemic treaty, or I harp on health preparedness scheme. If you emphasize on preparedness, I am sure everything will be taken care of. Lastly, while talking about the bill, this is an umbrella legislation for which separate legislations already exist. There is no point having another act when the basic question of supply and distribution is not addressed. Both these things can happen. It has happened over a period of time. It is not that it has not happened in the last 75 years, but what has happened is at a very slow pace.